Good morning. I'm Christine Romans in for Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your day with us. We're going to begin this Tuesday morning in Washington as the Trump administration continues to attempt to rapidly reshape the government in its first few weeks.
President Trump has now imposed a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the United States. He's citing job creation. He says he wants to narrow the U.S. trade deficit. The move comes a week after Mr. Trump threatened and then just as quickly put on hold tariffs on Canada and Mexico. This as the president's plan to slash federal spending continues to hit legal roadblocks. A federal judge has extended a pause on Mr. Trump's plan to push millions of federal workers to resign from their jobs.
Today, President Trump is set to meet with King Abdullah of Jordan. This comes as he continues to defend his proposal to have the U.S. take over the Gaza Strip. Mr. Trump discussed the plans in depth during an interview with Fox News.
There's practically no building that's livable in the whole thing, on the whole Gaza Strip. I say we go in, we knock them all down, we just create something. No more Hamas. There's no Hamas there. There's nobody there. We move them into beautiful areas of the Middle East. I'd like to go to Egypt. They have a lot of land. I'd like to go to Jordan. I'd like to go to others.
We have team coverage ahead this hour, including more on President Trump's executive order on tariffs on steel and aluminum, as well as the new legal challenges facing the administration. But let's begin this hour with NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, good morning. Let's begin with the president's interview with Fox News. We heard a little bit of it over the weekend in the lead up, of course, to the Super Bowl. What else are you learning about the president's stance when it comes to Gaza?
Well, he's been talking a lot about Gaza, Christine and Savannah, and I should note that as that interview with Fox News was airing last night, at roughly the same time, the president was in the Oval Office making remarks, and he was asked about Gaza as well. The ceasefire deal that Hamas has put on hold, a prisoner and hostage swap this Saturday has been put on hold by Hamas because it says Israel is shooting at Palestinians in Gaza. And so the president said, with that being on hold, that he believes that all of the remaining hostages should be released on Saturday by 12 o'clock, he said. And if not, as you noted in that sound you played earlier, all hell would break loose. He also did caveat that by saying it's really up to the Israelis. The Israelis might decide differently, but his belief was that the hostages, all of the remaining hostages, should be released. Now, at the same time, we know that President Trump has talked about the United States, about his administration taking ownership of that enclave and not allowing Palestinians to move back into it. Rather, they would be moved into other countries. You heard him reference Egypt and Jordan in particular. He was asked about that during this interview with Fox News. I want you to hear a little more of what he had to say about it.
So when you hear the pushback from the Middle East, what do you think?
I don't hear that much pushback. A lot of people thought it was a great idea. Really, a lot of people. And I'm not talking about big money for I just think it would be stabilized if the United States owns the Gaza Strip. If people aren't living in the Gaza Strip and Hamas isn't there because nobody's there, people aren't there, nobody's going to be there. And later on it can be developed. You'll give some to Saudi Arabia.
So you're not saying U.S. troops?
No, you don't need no, Israel will watch it because it's right next to Israel.
Now, critics have called this effectively ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and we've also heard from many Arab countries say that they don't want to see Palestinians displaced and they don't want them moved into their countries, Christine and Savannah.
Yeah, Aaron, one of those countries is Jordan, and we said today that President Trump will be meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan. What's their stance right now? What do we expect to happen there?
Well, so this meeting is supposed to happen a little later this morning. It's interesting, I think, that we got the schedule from the White House for the president today, and it does not include a press conference between these two leaders. We saw the Israeli prime minister and the Japanese prime minister at the White House last week. There were news conferences with both of them. In this case, bilateral meeting, a lunch, a working lunch, and that's it. So the only time we'll see the two men together will be on the arrival and the departure. It's expected that this will come up. The idea of moving Palestinians into Jordan will come up with the Jordanian king, and that there will be pushback. There was a question put to President Trump in the Oval Office last night as to whether he would stop foreign aid to Jordan and to Egypt if they didn't take in Palestinians. And he said, and I'll read this, sure, why not? You mean if they don't agree? If they don't agree, I would conceivably withhold aid. So that's something that apparently is now on the table.
And Aaron, while we have you this morning, I want to ask you about some news out of Washington that's making waves here in New York City. The DOJ ordering federal prosecutors to drop those corruption charges against the New York City mayor, Eric Adams. That's according to a senior Justice Department official. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this same official says that the acting deputy deputy attorney general has ordered that these charges be dropped and that they be dropped without prejudice, meaning that they could be refiled in the future. These corruption charges against the mayor of New York, they've not been dismissed yet. We did hear from Eric Adams' lawyer, who said that this is a win, a victory for his team. And you might remember that this indictment came down in September of last year, and this memo from the acting attorney general suggests that it was too close to this year's mayoral primary coming up in June, and also that this indictment limited Adams' ability to work with President Trump to crack down on immigrants in New York City. And so we expect that the administration, once this happens, if it happens, a judge does have to review this order, that the case would be reviewed by the incoming Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in New York in the Southern District after the general election for mayor in November. And I think, Christine and Savannah, that is something that has some people wondering if this is politically motivated, that if these charges are dropped against the mayor, then there would be the Trump administration would be able to sort of hang that over Eric Adams' head and have him be more open to doing what the Trump administration wants him to do.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much for that.
Let's turn now to Trump's trade wars. All steel and aluminum imports will soon face a steep 25% tariff coming into the U.S.
President Trump signed a proclamation yesterday ordering the tariffs to take effect in March with no exceptions. Of course, this is part of his campaign pledge that would help bring back the American steel industry, he says. Here's how he predicts that will play out.
You're going to ultimately have a price reduction because they're going to make their steel here. There's not going to be any tariff. These foreign companies will move to the United States, will make their steel and aluminum in the United States. Ultimately, it'll be cheaper.
We have NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung here to help break it down. Brian, good morning. So are we hearing from these other countries, from places that would be kind of the recipient of this, even though we pay it here in the U.S.? Does that mean we're kind of in a trade war now? Are we seeing retaliation?
Yeah, well, I mean, the European Union is weighing counteractions. You heard from the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, saying that he thinks that this is unjustified, which, by the way, comes just weeks after we thought we staved off a tariff war with Canada, right? Pushed off those overall headline tariffs on the country of Canada, at least to March 1st. And now you have these aluminum and steel tariffs, which, yes, they're industry specific, but make no mistake, Canada is the biggest exporter, or rather accounts for the largest amount of imports into the United States at over 20%, over $6 billion. So this is very targeted to specifically our neighbors to the north and south. And the expectation would be that there would be some sort of retaliation at some point.
And these are American allies, when really it's China and China's trade practices that is the real problem for the steel industry, the president says. And you've got the U.S. steelworkers saying, look, Canada's not the problem. Canada actually works with us. And you've got the can manufacturers group saying, oh, by the way, the food that you eat, the canned fruits and vegetables,
aluminum,
those come in cans that will now be more expensive, and that's a food security problem. Do we know what the impact will be on American consumers yet?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned canned food. I mean, that is, in many cases, a low-cost alternative for Americans that maybe can't buy fresh food. And you do have the risk of aluminum prices that could be higher because of these tariffs, making those things more expensive. But you saw some of the other items as well. Cars and trucks are a major part of the North American economy. So if you have tariffs on both your neighbors to the north and south, that would likely make car prices go up as well. It can't be overlooked that heavy machinery, appliances, a washing machine that requires a lot of steel, let's say, for example, from Korea, which is also a major trade partner with the United States, the expectation would be that those prices would all be going up. But, Christine, you get at a point, which is that what we just heard from President Trump in that soundbite earlier is an idea that this would reshore American steel. That's not exactly how this works. In the course of one administration, you can't bring all these companies into the United States to set up steel factories. It takes a long time to do that. So the short-term implications of this would certainly be price increases. It's only over the long run, if these tariffs are sustained, that you could bring those countries into the United States to produce. And that didn't happen in his first term, when he actually lifted the tariffs on steel and aluminum on some countries after just a year.
It's so interesting, too, that Nippon Steel wanted to buy U.S. Steel, a Japanese company, an American ally. That investment he's not allowing to go through, right?
Nope. And now tariffing Japanese steel.
Right. So I don't know. That doesn't kind of square, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you go, let's switch really quickly. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he's going to be testifying before Congress today. We know this is after they have decided to hold interest rates steady. What do you expect when he's in front of Congress?
Yeah, and I want to remind people that you might see these kind of flashy headlines out of his appearance on Capitol Hill. This is not a confirmation hearing, as you've been seeing from D.C. with a number of other Trump appointees. The Fed chair has his position until 2026, so I just want to make that clear. But yes, he's going to be fielding questions about monetary policy. The Fed chose not to raise interest rates or lower interest rates. They kept them just the same in their last meeting in January. I was trying to remember exactly exactly how long ago that was because this year has been crazy. But, the expectation is that the Fed likely won't be that aggressive on cutting interest rates after making a few marginal cuts last year. And by the way, there was some concern that the Fed chair will be running into a buzzsaw in the form of President Trump in form of criticism on his social media, as was the case during his first term. But actually, President Trump did endorse the first decision that was made post-inauguration. Trump saying holding rates at this point was the right thing to do. So maybe this isn't going to be as fiery as maybe we were expecting. But again, there'll be hours of testimony, which I will be very eager to dial into.
It's good. It's okay that you don't remember when the meeting was.
Jerome Powell,
That's right.
there's a Brian.
Oh, if there's a Jerome Powell, I'm there.
What a year this week has been. I mean, come on.
I know. Brian and Christine, thanks for the tariff geek out. Love it. Thanks, guys.
It is a little bit of a tariff geek out. Okay. Those new tariffs we've been reporting on are threatening to strain the traditional close relationship between the U.S. and Canada, as we've said. NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin went to talk to our neighbors to the north about how the potential trade war is affecting their wallet and their attitudes toward the U.S.
With President Trump announcing fresh tariffs and renewing talk of making Canada the 51st state, many Canadians say they're stealing their resolve for a trade war.
We feel betrayed.
Outside Toronto, retiree Susan Bright is going to battle at Vince's supermarket, searching for over an hour to find produce that's not made in America, a tough task in the frigid Canadian winter.
Betrayal is a strong word.
It is, and that's how I feel.
Why?
Because we've been neighbors and friends and partners and allies for years, hundreds of years.
With Canada a top supplier of both steel and aluminum to the U.S., President Trump's latest announcement could have a major impact on critical industries in both countries, from cars to construction. And while the president has temporarily paused his more sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian goods, it's all led to deep economic uncertainty and anger. Vince's store owner, Giancarlo Tremarchi.
We've seen a real resurgence from our customer base as they look to shop local and support Canadian brands. That's a huge movement right now.
So customers are asking you.
Demanding.
Demanding.
And we don't do that very often here in Canada.
Those demands stretching to travel, with many Canadians canceling their trips to the U.S. Bob Bloomer has been traveling to Florida every winter for the last 24 years.
I just can't justify going down there right now.
Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was recently caught on a hot mic saying he thinks Trump's talk of annexation is a real thing. That threat leading to this reaction to the U.S. national anthem in stadiums across the country. All of it transforming Canadian politics, forcing the Conservative Premier of Ontario into a dramatic U-turn.
Prior to these tariffs, you yourself said you were 100% Trump. Do you regret that position?
Well, Trump 1.0 is now Trump 2.0. I never thought in a million years he'd threaten his closest ally and treasured partner.
With the U.S. GDP roughly 10 times the size of Canada's, some say all they can do is wait.
So how does this end?
In about 4 years, things will get better. If you guys down south don't mess it up too much.
Well, we could talk about. You could talk about.
When you make the Canadians, man, you know something's going on.
Questions all morning. All right. Well, for the second time, a federal judge has hit the pause button on a deadline for federal workers to consider the Trump administration's unorthodox buyout package.
The judge upheld the pause after hearing arguments from unions on Monday, who claim the offer is simply illegal. The Trump administration has pledged 8 months of pay and benefits to federal workers who resign. Following the judge's ruling, President Trump defended his efforts to drastically downsize the federal workforce.
Well, I don't know how you can lose a case like that. I got elected on making government better, more efficient, and smaller. And that's what we're doing. And I think it was a very generous buyout, actually.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now. Danny, good morning. So what did the unions argue in court yesterday?
Yeah, if there's a word of the week, it's going to be the word pause in the legal landscape, because that's what a lot of these courts are doing. The unions are arguing in court that this is a kind of unlawful ultimatum. They say that it's chaotic. They say that it's going to be unprecedented. But none of those are really necessarily legal arguments unless they can show that what the administration did was, in fact, unlawful. And you're going to hear a lot about the Administrative Procedures Act over the next few weeks and maybe few months. And what that means is that if an agency issues a final action and it's arbitrary and capricious, in other words, it was not done with any thought, it's random, it's not justified, then it may violate federal law. But the problem with that is the APA doesn't necessarily say that the ultimate exercise of power was unlawful. It just says that you did it in a slapdash manner, so you have to go back to the drawing board. So for the Trump administration, seeing these APA challenges, that might actually embolden them rather than cause them to back down.
I'm looking at all this list of what federal judges have been saying about Trump administration moves here. A different set of federal judges weighed in on major funding cuts to the National Institutes of Health. 22 state attorneys general filed a lawsuit in that one. These judges, they've temporarily blocked the effort to limit government funding on things like equipment maintenance, utilities, support staff at NIH. What are these judges saying?
Yeah, essentially, not only are we dealing with a kind of stay, and this is something courts do. People think of courts as granting money judgments or sending people to prison. One of the lesser used powers is the stay power. And we're seeing so much in the way of the pause, the stay, that we're seeing multiple kinds of stays. There's the kind where the judge actually determines, hey, this party is likely to win on the merits, and that requires a mini trial of sorts. So we're going to preserve the status quo. But we're even seeing before that, the stay before the stay is the stay where you say, we don't even know what's going on. All the parties need to brief these issues. We need to consider them. And that's what's happening in these courts, including in Massachusetts, where, for example, the federal buyout program is being paused a few days and then another few days, not because of the merits, but just so all the parties can brief the issue and the court can determine this almost pure issue of law, whether this is constitutional or in violation of federal statutes.
So, Danny, at the end of the day, do these federal courts have the power? Will they have the long-term ability to essentially function as this check on executive power?
Do they have the power? Yes, with an asterisk. They unquestionably have the power. The Supreme Court determined this hundreds of years ago, that they can pass on the constitutionality and the legality of the executive branch's actions. But we have a smattering of historical events that lead us to the conclusion that we could have a constitutional crisis, because what if a court, including the Supreme Court, issues an order or a decision and the president just says, nah, I don't feel like following it. You may laugh, but this has happened to some degree. Andrew Jackson famously defied a Supreme Court order to resume at least assisting the resettlement of Cherokee Nation folks in Georgia. This is the kind of thing that creates a constitutional crisis, because really the courts don't have their own army to force anyone to do anything. They have a few marshals, and that's about it.
All right, Dana Savalos, nice to see you. Thank you. Right here in New York City, relief this morning in the LGBTQ community after 3 men were convicted of drugging, robbing, and murdering men leaving gay bars. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has the details and reaction from one of the victims' family.
These 3 men found guilty of a robbery and murder scheme that terrorized New York City's gay bars for more than a year. Jaquan Hamilton, Robert DeMeo, and Jacob Barrasso convicted of murder, drugging and robbing intoxicated gay men. 2 were killed, 25-year-old Julio Ramirez and 33-year-old John Umberger. Umberger's mother, Linda Clary, was in court for the verdicts.
We are heartbroken because nothing is going to bring John back, but we are just so grateful to God that hopefully no one else will be hurt by these men.
Clary's been on a 2-year odyssey for justice that took her from her home in Georgia to New York many times. We spoke in April 2023.
I can't help think but how lucky John was to have you as his mom.
I was lucky to have him as my son.
Prosecutors said the 3 men gave their victims drugs, including fentanyl and cocaine, stole their phones, and then sometimes using facial recognition technology, drained their accounts. In a statement, New York's District Attorney Alvin Bragg said the convicted trio were motivated by greed and took advantage of people who just wanted to enjoy the city's nightlife. Linda Clary says her son loved this city.
Oh, John was my oldest son, best friend, and just a great human being.
Defense attorneys say they will appeal, but for John, Julio, and their families, a step towards justice. Ann Thompson, NBC News, New York.
Well, at least 1 person is dead and 4 others injured after a private jet crashed into another jet after landing at the Scottsdale Municipal Airport in Arizona yesterday. It happened around 2:30 p.m. local time. You can see it on your screen. Officials say the incoming jet suddenly veered off the runway, shortly after landing, hitting that other jet. The National Transportation Safety Board is currently investigating the incident, but local officials say part of the landing gear on that incoming jet failed. The jet's owned by the band Motley Crue's lead singer, Vince Neil. His lawyer says he was not on board, but his girlfriend and her friend were, and they did sustain injuries. This incident is the latest in a string of deadly plane accidents in the last few weeks.
All right. This morning, more than 20 million people under winter weather alerts from Texas to New Jersey as parts of the U.S. brace for another round of winter storms this week.
Yeah, the highest snowfall totals are expected in the mid-Atlantic, where places like Washington, D.C., could see up to 8 inches. Officials warn of potentially hazardous driving conditions with a mix of freezing rain and sleet. Doesn't that sound nice? That can result in dangerously icy roads.
Oh, February. NBC News correspondent Priya Sridhar is live in Lexington, Kentucky, which is also in this storm's path.
Look at that
we
snow.
can see it snowing behind you, Priya. Good morning. The first of these storms is supposed to make its way across the U.S. today. What's it like right now? What are officials where you are preparing for?
Yeah, guys. Well, it's kind of like a winter wonderland right now. I feel like I'm in a little bit of a snow globe. And if you guys remember earlier this month, the groundhog saw his shadow, which meant we were going to have potentially 6 more weeks of winter. And that's certainly turning out to be the case, because not only are we going to be contending with this snowstorm that's happening right now, it's actually a triple whammy. So we're going to have back-to-back-to-back snowstorms hitting so much of the country over the next 7 days. But as you mentioned, here in central Kentucky, this is kind of the epicenter of the snowstorm that we're dealing with right now. We could see anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of snow around here. We actually have been under a winter storm warning since 7 p.m. last night that could extend all the way until 7 a.m. this morning. And it's been steadily snowing for the last few hours. Many public schools in the area are closed preemptively in preparation for this snow. And I will say that it's about 31 degrees right now, which means that even though, as you can see around me, the snow is starting to accumulate a little bit on the grassy areas, if you look behind me on the roads, it's actually not accumulating just yet. And that's really good news as far as those dangerous driving conditions that you guys were talking about. It's too warm on the roads, at least right now, for things to really accumulate. But for those kiddos who are waking up this morning and they don't have school to go to, I can tell you that take a look at this. It's kind of perfect weather for a great snowball. So it's a day that could potentially be full of snowstorms, or snow fights, I should say, and also building snowmen, guys.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Priya, how can people stay safe, like especially in some of these parts where we're talking about, like where you are, or D.C. with 8 inches, where they're not so used to this kind of snow? What are officials telling residents to keep in mind when they're not used to this?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You know, they were joking on the local news this morning that if you were to see 3 to 6 inches of snow in a place like Minnesota or Buffalo, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal. But here in Kentucky, it's not super normal to have these big kind of blizzard-like conditions. But they did actually have a snowstorm just about a month ago, so they learned a lot of lessons from that. And the Lexington-Fayette County Division of Roads and Streets actually say that they have more than 40 dump trucks. Each of them can carry about 25 tons of salt. They have 3,000 tons of salt ready to go, and they've been pre-treating the roads since earlier this morning. But really, the big warning, or I guess what they're trying to tell folks, the officials, the city officials here, is to try to stay off the roads if you don't have anything urgent to do today. If you can sort of delay some of your activities until a day or two from now, they really want to keep the roads as clear as possible so the snow plows that are coming through can clear the ways, and that also emergency responders will have an opportunity to respond to the people who really need them, guys.
Hey, Priya, it's early, but what about travel delays and cancellations? What should we know?
So far, things are looking not too bad just yet. We're seeing the most delays out of airports in the Northeast. That's Boston, Newark, and also LaGuardia, which isn't super surprising because that's in the Northeast, where, by the way, you guys can also expect some of your own snow later tonight. But as you mentioned, there will be big accumulations of snowfall in both Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., both major travel hubs. So if you are flying today, it's important to check your flight status, because even if you're not flying through the path of this storm, there's a really big chance that there could be a domino effect, and you could see some delays and cancellations, especially later today.
All right, Priya Sridhar, thank you so much,
Thanks,
Priya.
Priya. Well, let's get a closer look at how this winter storm may impact your area with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Denise Isaac joins us now. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning, ladies. So right where Priya is, we're getting about an inch per hour of that heavy, wet snow. So great for building snowman. This area of low pressure will continue to move towards the east, bringing snow across West Virginia, into Virginia and Washington, D.C., as well as Delaware. This is the first storm system this week where we are tracking it affecting the mid-Atlantic with not only snow, but also ice and the potential for heavy rain. The cutoff will be pretty much south of New York. New York may see an inch or so of a few flurries later on tonight. Then tomorrow, another one forms right on its heels. This time around, though, for the Ohio Valley, it will be mostly rain to our north from eastern Colorado all the way into Michigan. That's where we're tracking some heavy, wet snow, with Chicago getting possibility of anywhere between 4 to 8 inches of that heavy, wet snow. While to our south in D.C., Maryland, this will be the threat for ice and also some freezing rain through Thursday. So here we go. We can see those accumulations. Quite dangerous travel conditions around the Appalachians. As we take a look here at the snowfall forecast through Thursday, we already talked about this first system bringing snow to the mid-Atlantic. Then the next one tomorrow into Thursday morning, bringing that snow over the UP of Michigan as well as Cedar Rapids, where we could get up to 8 inches of snow. To our south, it will be rain, 1 to 3 inches possible, with the potential for flash flooding. So keep that in mind. And not only that, but there's also a severe threat tomorrow with a few tornadoes possible, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. So what's really going on across the nation? Why is it so cold? Well, the jet stream has dipped south, so that record cold air continues to pretty much meander across the upper Midwest, with temperatures today, Miles City, 42 degrees below average. Tomorrow, that cold air sticks around and even filters down south and towards Oklahoma and Texas. And as we see here, bitterly cold towards the upper Midwest. Richmond, Virginia, it's a roller coaster ride with 50s on Thursday. By Saturday, 50 degrees. But it will be cold and sunny, though, for Philly as they celebrate the Eagles on Friday. Ladies,
there you go. Important detail there. Denise, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.